The only name on the line for next of kin at the ICU was that of the daughter-in-law. Have you ever seen a family like that? It was Clara's reality. Through the cold glass of the intensive care unit, she stared blankly at her father-in-law, Walter, lying motionless. The only thing breaking the silence was the mechanical hum of various medical devices. Walter, relying on an oxygen mask to draw his shallow, ragged breaths, had been unconscious for a month. A deep exhaustion was etched onto Clara's face. She had been keeping vigil at the hospital for days, barely finding time to wash. Just then, a nurse stepped out into the hallway and handed Clara a thick stack of papers. "Ma'am, the overdue hospital bills from last month have already surpassed $5,000. If payment isn't made by the end of today, we may run into a difficult situation, according to hospital policy. Please review these." Clara took the documents with a trembling hand and bowed her head. "Yes, I'm so sorry. I'll take care of it right away. I'm truly sorry." As soon as the nurse left, Clara leaned against the wall and let out a deep sigh. She turned on her phone, and 5 unread text messages immediately flooded the screen. They were a litany of numbers tightening their grip around her neck. Overdue credit card notices, and now, the hospital's final warning. Sitting on a hard chair just outside the unit, Clara pulled a credit card from her wallet. Her finger trembled slightly as she checked the cash advance limit. A mere $2,000 remaining. If she used that to pay a fraction of the hospital bill and buy groceries for the upcoming Thanksgiving dinner, there would be nothing left. Clara tapped at her phone's calculator, clutching her head in her hands. She had poured every penny she had saved into Walter's care for the past month, but not a single member of her husband's family had contributed a dime. Just then, the sharp click of heels echoed from the end of the hall. It was her mother-in-law, Margaret, but she didn't even glance toward the ICU where her husband lay. She walked straight to Clara and launched her attack. "What are you doing here? Didn't you see my texts? Thanksgiving is in 2 days. Have you even started preparing the food?" Startled, Clara stood up. "Margaret, you're here. Dad's condition took a turn for the worse today, so I've been staying by his side. I was planning to go grocery shopping this afternoon." Margaret scoffed, looking Clara up and down with disdain. "His condition is the doctor's business. You think he's going to leap out of bed just because you're sitting there? And how many side dishes are you planning to make? Last year, the portions were so small I heard the relatives whispering behind my back. Do you want to disgrace our family?" Clara stared at her mother-in-law, dumbfounded. Her husband was fighting for his life, yet all Margaret could think about was the Thanksgiving feast. The scene felt surreal. "Margaret, the hospital bills are 3 months overdue. They said if we don't pay today, he might have to be discharged. Can't we just reduce the number of dishes a little?" Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Are you kidding me? Your husband will figure out the hospital bills. And shouldn't the living take priority over the dying? We have a reputation to maintain. Are you suggesting we greet our guests with empty hands on Thanksgiving? How can you be so thoughtless? I'll prepare about 10 dishes with all my heart. I just don't have the funds right now because of Dad's medical expenses." 10. Don't make me laugh. We need at least 15 to even hold our heads up. Your aunt's family and your uncle's family are all coming this year. How dare a daughter-in-law use money as an excuse to skimp on our family traditions? Still fuming, Margaret pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. Clara's phone buzzed loudly. "Look closely at what I just sent you. I've listed everything, from the types of appetizers to the number of pies. Don't you dare argue. Just prepare it exactly as I've written. Got it?" The message was a long, detailed list. A deep-fried turkey and a traditional roasted one. 3 kinds of stuffing, various casseroles, and more than 15 specific side dishes. Clara bit her lip and replied, "Yes, I understand, but Kevin hasn't been home or answering his phone for days. Could you please talk to him? Don't you know how hard your husband works out there? A man with big responsibilities can't always be home. Is this something you need to tattle to me about? If you need help, you should be sweet-talking him, not being so frigid." Having said her piece, Margaret turned and left, disappearing into an elevator without even approaching the door to the ICU. Clara watched her retreating back and muttered to the empty air, "To this family, I guess, I was never a person, just a free servant." Returning home, Clara was greeted by a bone-chilling cold. She had turned off the heat to save money for the hospital bills. Opening the refrigerator, she saw only empty shelves, filled with Walter's prescription bags for his diabetes and heart condition. On the dining table, notifications from the family group chat were pinging incessantly. "Clara, I'm so looking forward to your roasted turkey again this year. Last year's was absolutely divine. Poor thing. With your father-in-law so ill. You must be exhausted. But we have to keep up our family traditions, right? Amid the phony encouragement from relatives and her husband Kevin's indifference, Clara felt utterly abandoned. The clock already showed 4 a.m. Even the time spent commuting between the hospital and home was a luxury she couldn't afford. There was shopping, prepping ingredients, and cooking all night long. There was never enough time. Clara sank onto the sofa and closed her eyes for a moment. But less than 10 minutes later, her phone rang again. It was Margaret. Clara, I forgot to mention. Make sure to bake plenty of pumpkin bread. A lot of the relatives love it. Oh, and the eggnog, don't even think about buying it from a store. You make it from scratch. The store-bought kind is just sweet and has no flavor. Margaret, it's 4 in the morning. I haven't slept and I have to go shopping. Making eggnog from scratch is really too much. You do it, even if you have to stay up all night. A daughter-in-law who can't even handle one Thanksgiving meal properly. Just get it done without complaining. The line went dead. A moment later, a text from her husband, Kevin, arrived. Sorry, I'm swamped with a project deadline. Can't make it home. Just do what Mom says for Thanksgiving prep. I'm counting on you. Clara didn't even have the energy to reply. She tossed her phone aside and headed to the market. It was the peak holiday rush. The aisles so crowded you could barely move. The haggling voices of shoppers and vendors pierced her ears. The crisp $20 bills from her cash advance disappeared effortlessly as she bought ingredients. One salmon fillet, please. Oh, for a holiday meal? You'll need at least two. One fillet is barely enough for one person. I can't afford it. Just one, please. Clara swallowed her feeling of humiliation and filled her shopping cart. She got home at 8 a.m. Without a moment's rest, she sank to the kitchen floor and began prepping. As she washed squash and peeled potatoes in the cold water, the feeling in her fingertips faded away. At 2 p.m., Margaret called again to check in. Well, Clara, is the turkey brining? You know how famous our family's Thanksgiving turkey is. Margaret, I ran out of money. I couldn't afford to buy the 2 turkeys you wanted. I spent over $200 just on the ingredients for the side dishes. What? A Thanksgiving table without a magnificent turkey display. Get out there and buy them now. Don't you dare talk to me about budgets. Borrow from your parents if you have to. Didn't they teach you anything? Margaret's verbal abuse made Clara's head spin. She opened the fridge again. Amidst her father-in-law's medication bags, a lone piece of leftover pizza from a month ago sat on a plate. Starving, she shoved a cold bite into her mouth just as a final ultimatum came from the hospital. Ma'am, if the outstanding balance isn't settled by tomorrow morning, we will have to initiate the discharge process. We can no longer extend any courtesies. Clara checked her bank account balance. $84. She let out a hysterical laugh. She had already used the last of her credit limit on Thanksgiving groceries. At 11 p.m., hot oil from a frying pan splattered onto the back of her hand. Even as she watched the skin blister and turn red, Clara mechanically flipped the fritters over and over. Just a little more. Just a little more. By 2 a.m., the entire house reeked of grease. But only 5 of the 15 required dishes were ready. Clara collapsed onto the sofa. But an hour later, the alarm for her next hospital visit blared, and she rose like a zombie. Her reflection in the mirror was beyond haggard. It was corpse-like. The skin under her eyes was a bruised, dark purple, and her hands were a mess of burns and knife cuts. So this is what I look like. 10 years of being a daughter-in-law, and this is all that's left. Clara walked back out into the cold pre-dawn air, heading for the hospital, but deep inside her, something hot was beginning to boil over. It wasn't sadness, it was a cold, sharp rage. As soon as the exhausted Clara stepped through her front door, her phone vibrated violently. She checked it to find over 20 new messages from her mother-in-law. Margaret. Each was a command, a directive that made Clara feel like she was suffocating. Set the table properly. Soups on the left, roasts on the right, vegetables in the center. And you need at least 3 kinds of pickles. The bread and butter ones are essential. 25 relatives confirmed this time. So set up the main dining table and the kids' table in the living room. Clara, struggling to stay conscious, stumbled into the kitchen. On the cluttered cutting board, the ingredients she hadn't finished prepping yesterday were piled up like a mountain. Just then, Margaret called again. The moment Clara answered, a voice bordering on a shriek exploded from the speaker. Well, Clara, did you just check your messages now? Or what? If even one thing is missing, I swear I'll humiliate you in front of all the relatives tomorrow. Yes, Margaret. I just got home and I'm starting again. Don't worry. Starting what? Do you know what time it is? The guests will be arriving tomorrow morning. You should have had all the appetizers fried and all the vegetables prepped by now. Why do you have to make me this anxious every single holiday? Margaret, I didn't get a wink of sleep at the hospital last night. I'm doing my best. Please, try to understand. My best? Don't you know this family hosts the biggest Thanksgiving on the block? Aren't you afraid of what people will say? The family's reputation rests on the daughter-in-law's fingertips, so don't you dare think you can get away with a half-assed job and tarnish my name. Margaret hung up without waiting for a reply. Clara slammed the knife down on the countertop. Her hands were shaking too much to even peel a carrot. Until 4 a.m., she stood in the grease-filled air, frying and roasting, enduring the feeling of her spine about to snap as she mixed salads. Her eyelids felt like they were weighted with lead, and a numbness was creeping over her entire body. Around 6 a.m., unable to fight off the overwhelming sleepiness, Clara leaned back on the sofa for a moment. But less than 30 minutes later, a sharp notification sound jolted her awake. It was a push alert from her banking app. Account debit. $3,800. Clara shot up, her heart pounding. That account was the joint checking account she shared with her husband, Kevin. It was where she had deposited the money she'd borrowed from her parents and taken from the cash advance, all to cover her father-in-law's care and the hospital bills. Sensen Babamayan. Why was this money withdrawn? What on earth is going on? Her heart hammered against her ribs. She frantically checked the transaction details and collapsed right where she stood. The name on the recipient line was stark and clear. TopTierBets.com. That man. He's lost his mind. He's completely insane. Does he know what that money was for? With trembling hands, Clara called Kevin. The phone rang and rang, but he didn't pick up. She called twice, 3 times, 5 times, but there was only silence from his end. Finally, her fingers stiff with rage, she sent a text. Kevin, I just checked the bank account. $3,800 was sent to a gambling site. Did you do this? Call me right now. An hour later, a careless reply finally came. Talk later. Swamped with a project deadline. Overcome with fury, Clara hurled her phone at the dining table. It clattered to the floor with a sharp crack, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across the screen. The caregiver. There's no money for a caregiver now. And Dad's hospital bills. What do I do? Even in this desperate situation, time marched on. The family group chat lit up again. Clara, the bourbon-glazed ham you made last year was a work of art. Looking forward to that melt-in-your-mouth goodness again this year. I'm so excited for your homemade pumpkin bread. The store-bought ones are too sweet, but yours is just perfect. That's right, sis. The kids are already asking for your mac and cheese. Please make it with love. Clara wanted to leave the chat group that very second, but her fingers wouldn't move. Then, as if on cue, Margaret's confirmation of death call came through. Clara, did you see the group chat? Is the ham and the pumpkin bread all ready? Margaret, I'm out of money. Kevin took all the money from our checking account. If you're out of money, you should have found a way to get more. It's Thanksgiving. What kind of excuse is that? If you have to, max out your credit cards and buy what's needed. My credit cards are already maxed out. I told you, I used everything for Dad's hospital bills. Then go to your parents and ask them for a loan. When a husband is struggling out in the world, his wife is supposed to support him. How dare a daughter-in-law complain about having no money? Are you trying to bring shame on this family? I swear, it's because you weren't raised right. Margaret's verbal onslaught made Clara's mind go blank. To be told she wasn't raised right, after enduring all this humiliation, the world went dark. At 2 p.m., the hospital called. The attending physician's voice was urgent and grave. Ma'am, the patient's condition is deteriorating rapidly. His blood pressure is dropping, and his breathing is unstable. Can you come to the hospital immediately? What? What do you mean? My father-in-law? Today could be critical. It would be best to contact all family members and have them come as soon as possible. Clara frantically grabbed her purse. On the kitchen floor, the uncooked meat and vegetables lay scattered about. As she headed for the door, she sent a hurried text to Margaret. Margaret, Dad's condition is very bad. The doctor said today might be it. I'm going to the hospital now. The reply came back in less than a minute. Its contents tore Clara's heart to shreds. You can go to the hospital later. It's not like he's going anywhere. Finish the cooking first. What are you going to do when the guests arrive tomorrow morning? Your father-in-law is in the doctor's hands. So stop making a fuss and get back in the kitchen. Clara read the message and gripped her phone so tightly, her knuckles turned white. A chill ran through her body, a cold fury that rose to the top of her head. Ignoring her mother-in-law's command, she ran like a madwoman to the hospital. When she arrived at the ICU, the physician was waiting with a grim expression. You need to prepare yourself. His vitals are continuing to drop. Clara looked through the cold glass at her father-in-law. The old man, sustained only by the beeping machines, seemed a tragic reflection of her own life. Did the caregiver not arrive? You requested one yesterday. They haven't come. The agency is hesitant because of the outstanding payment issues. It seems you'll have to handle the care yourself for now. Clara bit her lip until she tasted blood. The $3,800 for the caregiver had been gambled away by the man she called her husband. She couldn't tell that to anyone. Just then, Margaret called again. Where are you now? Are you playing games with me? Where are you wandering around instead of cooking? Get your ass home this instant. This time, Clara didn't answer. Instead, she pressed her cold forehead against the ICU window. So, this was my life. A life spent grinding myself into dust for your holiday, only to be treated like an incompetent daughter-in-law who can't even pay a bill. Clara wiped her tears away fiercely. She wasn't sad anymore. Now, there was only one thought in her mind. How could she bring this hellish house down in the most devastating way possible? The light in Clara's eyes grew colder than ever before. Clara spent the night at the hospital and finally arrived home, a complete wreck. Her clothes smelled of antiseptic, and her eyes were so bloodshot she could barely keep them open. But what greeted her at the door wasn't concern, but a volley of demands. Oh, Clara, you're finally here. I was starving to death. Is the food ready? My kids skipped breakfast because they were so excited to eat your cooking. Forcing a smile, Clara went straight to the kitchen. The table wasn't set, and the food she had made wasn't even reheated yet. Suddenly, the kitchen door flew open, and her mother-in-law, Margaret, stormed in, her face already twisted with rage. Well, Clara, are you in your right mind? Do you know how many guests are here? And you just waltz in now, dragging your feet? Are you doing this on purpose to provoke me? Margaret, Dad's vitals were dropping so low, they said he might not make it through the night, so I stayed. I'll get the food on the table right now. Right now? You should have been here since dawn. And you're using a dying man as an excuse to neglect your duties as a daughter-in-law? All our guests have arrived, and this is the state of things. Too exhausted to argue, Clara silently took the appetizers out of the refrigerator. The burn on her hand stung, but she began arranging them on a cold platter. Nearly 50 relatives were already gathered in the living room. The house was a chaotic mess of children shouting and adults talking loudly. As Clara tried to carry the heavy tray into the living room, Margaret blocked her path again. She glanced at the platter of food and shrieked in disbelief. Wait a minute, is this it? Are you joking? There are only 7 different kinds of appetizers. I specifically told you to make at least 15. Margaret, as I said, I didn't have enough time. And the budget was, I cut it down as much as I could. This is as much as you could do? Last year, you set a table that was groaning with food, and this year you've decided to purposefully disgrace our family. Don't lie about money. I know you're just being lazy. The shouting match at the kitchen entrance made all the relatives in the living room turn their heads and start whispering. Clara felt their stares like burning coals and bit her lip hard. Aware of her audience, Margaret raised her voice even louder. And I don't see the bourbon glazed ham. Where's the homemade eggnog I asked for? And why did you buy a pumpkin pie from the store? Is this a feast for the head of the family or a cheap potluck? Margaret, please, keep your voice down. The relatives are all watching. So what? They all need to know what a pathetic daughter-in-law you are. How dare you talk back to your mother-in-law? Snide comments started to surface from the crowd of relatives. Wow, daughters-in-law have it so easy these days. I can't imagine such a thing in my day. Look at her face. Her mother-in-law is speaking to her, and she's openly showing her displeasure. I'd be scared to even say a word to her. Swallowing the humiliation, Clara carried the tray to the center of the living room. 50 pairs of eyes scrutinized her shabby appearance and the meager offerings. Margaret, as if on cue, stood in the middle of the room and began a grand speech, like an actress with an audience. Everyone, I am so terribly sorry. It seems I have failed in teaching my daughter-in-law properly. and our hospitality today is sorely lacking. The preparations were not done right, and the food is just dreadful. Last year was at least passable, but it seems she's gotten too comfortable this year. Clara placed the tray on the coffee table and said nothing. She just stared into the empty space. Well, Clara, you did your best to prepare this much on your own, one of the aunts said cautiously. But where's Kevin? It's Thanksgiving. Shouldn't he be helping? Clara replied in a low voice. He said he had urgent work to do, a project deadline, so he couldn't come. A project on Thanksgiving Day? Sounds like Kevin is avoiding home. I wonder what you do to make the atmosphere so unpleasant for him. A cousin chimed in, driving another nail into Clara's heart. Margaret seized the opportunity. It's because this daughter-in-law of mine has been putting on airs lately, using the hospital as an excuse. I'm tired from taking care of my father-in-law. We have no money, just whining and complaining. The truth is, we could have hired a caregiver, but she insisted on doing it herself, just so she could play the martyr. Clara's hands began to tremble. The truth that her son had gambled away the money for a caregiver was a fire burning in her throat, unable to escape. Still, with her father-in-law so ill, it's admirable that she's trying so hard on her own, isn't it? Admirable? It's her duty as a daughter-in-law. It's not something to be praised for, as if it's some great deed. Young people these days have no patience. The table setting is a mess. There aren't enough dishes. Our family's traditions are all being ruined because of you. You wretched girl. Margaret finally turned to face Clara directly, spitting venom. In front of 50 relatives, Clara felt like a prisoner being publicly stripped and executed. I warned you last year. I told you I wouldn't let it slide if you didn't do it properly this year. Why aren't you answering? Are you deaf? Say something. Clara slowly lifted her head. She looked directly into Margaret's eyes, which were staring at her as if she were an insect. There was no longer any sadness or resentment in Clara's eyes. There was only an icy, killing intent. Without a word, Clara gripped both sides of the coffee table. The relatives watched her with puzzled expressions, and a strange silence fell over the room. In that moment, with all her strength, Clara lifted the table and slammed it upside down onto the floor. Crash! Plates shattered, sending shards flying in every direction. The painstakingly prepared appetizers, the salads, the gravy, it all splattered across Margaret's expensive silk dress and the living room carpet. The room froze, as if doused with ice water. Margaret stood there, mouth agape, frozen like a statue. The snickering relatives screamed and scrambled backward. Clara looked down dispassionately at the food strewn across the floor, then picked up her purse from the sofa. Clara, you? What is this madness? Have you lost your mind? Margaret finally found her voice and shrieked, but Clara didn't even give her a glance. Instead, she walked calmly toward the front door. You stop right there. You crazy bitch. What do you think you're doing? Do you know where you are? Clara, slipping on her shoes, uttered one cold sentence. You all eat it. That precious family tradition you love so much? Go ahead, pick it up off the floor and cherish it. What? She's really gone insane. If you walk out that door today, it's over. Don't you ever think of setting foot in this house again. Without a backward glance, Clara opened the door and walked out. With a loud slam, the link to that hellish house was severed. Inside the elevator, Clara pulled out her vibrating phone. A barrage of frantic calls from Margaret was coming through. Without a moment's hesitation, Clara pressed and held the power button, turning the phone off. It's over. No. From now on, it's just the beginning. In the elevator mirror, for the first time in 10 years, Clara was smiling a beautiful, liberated smile. After storming out of the house, she blindly hailed a cab. She was out of breath, but strangely, a corner of her heart felt as if a great weight had been lifted, leaving a hollow, refreshing emptiness. The taxi driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror, her disheveled hair and tear-streaked face, and asked cautiously, "Ma'am, where to? The hospital? Or the police station?" For a moment, Clara hesitated. Her in-laws and her husband, Kevin, would surely expect her to go back to the hospital where her father-in-law lay, to get on her knees and beg for forgiveness. But Clara's resolve was firm. A brownstone in the West Village, please. As fast as you can. That was her parents' home, a place she had all but stopped visiting for 10 years, wanting only to show them that she was living a successful life, even while enduring all manner of abuse from her in-laws. As the taxi sped up, Clara took out her silenced phone from her pocket and turned it on. The screen lit up with 27 missed calls from Margaret and a stream of text messages filled with unspeakable curses. Are you insane? Get back here now. Your father-in-law is dying, and you pull a stunt like this, you crazy bitch. Clara let out a small, bitter laugh and pressed the power button again, holding it until the screen went black. The incessant buzzing stopped. It's really over. In your world, a person named Clara has been erased. Outside the window, peaceful holiday scenes drifted by. Couples holding hands with their children, laughing. People carrying gift bags, heading to their family homes. Watching that warm scenery, Clara shed silent tears. 30 minutes later, the taxi stopped in front of her parents' elegant brownstone. As she went to pay the fare, she looked at her own hands scarred from cooking burns and covered in rough calluses. She took the elevator up to the third floor and, with a trembling hand, rang the doorbell. From inside, her mother's kind voice called out, "Who is it? A delivery? Mom? It's me. It's Clara." The door flew open. Her mother, wearing a cheerful apron in the middle of preparing her own food, saw her daughter's state and dropped the spatula she was holding. "Clara, what are you doing here at this hour? And your face. What happened? Did something happen?" As her mother gripped her shoulders, the tightly wound cord of Clara's emotions finally snapped. Without even taking off her shoes, Clara buried her face in her mother's embrace and began to sob like a child. "Mom, I'm so tired. I can't go back there anymore. I can't do it. You did the right thing coming here. My poor child. Look at you. The dark circles under your eyes, your hands are all chapped. What have they been putting you through in that house?" Her mother led Clara into the master bedroom. She carefully changed the sheets on the bed Clara had used 10 years ago and fluffed the warm comforter. "Get some sleep first. When you wake up, Mom will make you the most delicious meal in the world. This is your home. Don't worry about anything. Just rest." "Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much." As Clara buried her face in the soft pillow, the tears flowed anew. Lying not on the hard floor of her in-laws' living room or a stiff chair in the ICU, but in a bed that smelled of her mother, she finally felt alive. Meanwhile, at the house Clara had left in chaos, a scene from hell was unfolding. Margaret was furiously stabbing at her phone, but Clara's was turned off. "That godless witch. How dare she throw soup in my face? I'm going to have her divorced first thing tomorrow and thrown out on the street." The living room floor was a minefield of broken plate shards and trampled food. With a gravy stain ruining her expensive dress, Margaret seethed with uncontrollable anger. The relatives sat on eggshells, glancing at each other and clearing their throats. "Margaret, shouldn't we at least clean up this food? The smell is awful, and there's nowhere to step. Why should I clean it? Clara made this mess. She can come back and lick it up herself. How dare I lift a finger?" Margaret's yelling made the relatives exchange looks of disgust. Just then, her phone rang loudly. It was the hospital, where her father-in-law was admitted. "Ma'am, what are you doing? The patient's breathing is about to stop. Why is no one here? And why was the caregiver canceled? Right now? Do we have to go right now? It's Thanksgiving. We have all these guests. Are your guests more important than a man's life? If a guardian doesn't arrive immediately, we can no longer be held responsible." Margaret hung up and stomped her feet, not knowing what to do. Going to the hospital meant revealing this chaotic scene to her guests. A deep humiliation, but not going meant her husband could die. "Margaret, you should hurry to the hospital. We'll be leaving now." "Oh, we should get going too. In this atmosphere, I don't think I could swallow a bite of food anyway." The relatives, feigning concern, made their excuses and fled the smelly, dirty house one by one. The home that had been bustling with people just an hour ago was now eerily empty, with only Margaret left. On the living room floor, the spilled gravy began to dry and stick. In the kitchen sink, a mountain of unwashed dishes from 50 people was piled up, nearly reaching the ceiling. The tasks that Clara had always silently handled now stood before Margaret like a giant, insurmountable wall. "I can just sweep this up. Does she think I can't manage without one daughter-in-law?" Margaret picked up a broom, but the greasy food was stuck to the floor like glue. One swipe of the broom only spread the oily mess, making the whole house gleam unpleasantly. Finally, she threw the broom down and called her son, Kevin. But Kevin, on the run from gambling debts, didn't answer either. "They're all ignoring me. Do you even call yourselves human?" Another urgent call came from the hospital. "Ma'am, we're starting CPR on the patient. Are you not coming?" All right. I'm coming." Margaret hastily grabbed her purse and ran to the door. But she froze. If she went to the hospital, who would care for her husband? Who would change his bedpan? The thought made her head spin. Frantically, she started calling caregiver agencies. Hello? I need a caregiver for the ICU right away. I'll pay whatever it costs. Ma'am, it's Thanksgiving Day. Who's going to work? We've been fully booked for a week. The earliest opening is in 3 days. What? 3 days? Then, who's supposed to take care of him until then? You'll have to do it yourself. Don't you have a daughter or a daughter-in-law? The line went dead. Margaret clutched her phone, trembling with rage. Until now, she had considered Clara's all-night vigils, changing her father-in-law's diapers, and washing his body to be her simple, obvious duty. Finally, heading to an empty hospital room alone, Margaret felt it for the first time, a bitter and painful realization. Without Clara, the daughter-in-law she had so despised and trampled upon, this family was nothing more than a ruin, worse than a garbage dump. Meanwhile, in her childhood bedroom, Clara was lost in a deep sleep for the first time in 10 years, free from anyone's interference. In the quiet peace, devoid of her mother-in-law's insults and her husband's neglect, Clara's wounded heart was slowly beginning to heal. Margaret, slumped uncomfortably in a hard hospital hallway chair, was startled awake by a phone call. She had tried to take over Clara's duties through the night, but she hadn't known the first thing about changing an adult diaper and had fumbled so much she didn't get a wink of sleep. Hello? This is Margaret, the patient's wife, Mrs. Last name. The care situation here is becoming very serious. The patient hasn't been properly cleaned since yesterday afternoon, and the preventative care for bed sores hasn't been done at all. When is the professional caregiver arriving? The nurse's sharp criticism made the back of Margaret's neck tense up. Well, I'm doing it now. It's the holiday, so I can't find a caregiver. You're doing it? Ma'am, you haven't been able to reposition the patient, and his skin is already becoming red and inflamed. You can't stay here 24/7. You need to find a solution quickly. Ending the call, Margaret let out a groan. Her back was screaming in protest from trying to lift her heavy husband by herself. Oh, my miserable life. Was this what Clara was doing? This bone-aching work? She muttered, then immediately shook her head, her expression hardening. No, it was her duty as a daughter-in-law. She's young. It's ridiculous that an old mother-in-law like me has to do this. When she finally got home, the stench that hit her as she opened the door made her wrinkle her nose in disgust. The smell of old cooking oil that had permeated the house for days mixed with the souring odor of the food Clara had thrown on the floor was truly vile. The living room was frozen in time, exactly as it was the day before. Broken plate shards were scattered like landmines, and in the sink, the mountain of dishes from 50 relatives was now growing mold. How am I ever going to clean all this? My back will break if I even try. Reluctantly, Margaret put on a pair of rubber gloves. But after trying to wash a single plate, she ripped them off and threw them down in a fit of pique. Why do I have to do this? This is all the daughter-in-law's job. How dare she run off and torment me like this? To quell her hunger, Margaret opened the refrigerator, but it was filled with the appetizers and side dishes Clara had made with her blood, sweat, and tears. But without someone to serve them, not a single one made its way to her mouth. Just then, her phone buzzed on the sofa. It was the family group chat. Margaret, did you get things sorted out from yesterday? Have you heard from Clara? Gritting her teeth, Margaret ignored the message. But then, even the relatives who usually tiptoed around her began to chime in with criticism. To be honest, Margaret, you were a bit too harsh yesterday. How could you let Clara prepare that entire meal for 50 people all by herself? That's right. We tried to help, but you stopped us, saying you needed to discipline your daughter-in-law. She was running between the hospital and the kitchen from dawn without any sleep. You were working her to death. Margaret, I think you need to formally apologize to your daughter-in-law for this. Otherwise, who's going to cook for the next family gathering? Margaret slammed her phone on the table. She was shaking with rage. What did I do wrong? I was just teaching her place as a daughter-in-law. What do you people know? Around 3 p.m., Margaret checked the calendar, and her heart sank. Her own father's memorial service was next week. It required over 10 different dishes, and all the special ingredients had to be handpicked at the market. Margaret rummaged through the notes Clara used to keep, but she had no idea where to even begin. How did Clara manage all this without a single complaint? Why won't that ill-mannered girl answer her phone? Margaret called Clara again, but was met with the cold, automated voice of her voicemail. The questions in the group chat were suffocating her. Margaret, have you started planning for the memorial next week? Without Clara, you'll have to do everything yourself. Oh my. The number of dishes for that service is no joke. What are you going to do? At 6 p.m., her son Kevin walked in, looking haggard. It was clear he'd spent the night at a casino, losing all his money. His eyes were bloodshot. Mom, still no word from Clara? And what's with the house? There's no food, and it stinks in here. And where have you been? Showing up now, on a holiday, with that attitude? Your father is dying, and you can't even manage your own wife, letting the house turn into this pigsty. As Margaret yelled, Kevin just got irritated and retreated to his room. You think I was out having fun? I was trying to make money. Mom, you need to sweet-talk Clara and get her back. Without her, my laundry isn't done, and I'm starving. At 10 p.m., sitting alone in the dark and inhaling the smell of rotting food, Margaret finally understood. The thing that had held up the great castle of this family wasn't her authority, but Clara's silent sacrifice. That witch Clara has to come back. Whether I have to drag her by the hair or slap her, I have to get her back. But public opinion within the family had already turned against Margaret. Whispers that Margaret went too far, and Kevin is irresponsible spread like wildfire among the relatives. No one offered to help with the housework, and the dishes in the sink began to exude a foul-smelling liquid, adding to the stench. Clara's absence wasn't just a lack of manpower. It was the prelude to the complete shutdown of the entire household. On the third day after Thanksgiving, in a house reeking of decay, Margaret answered a call from an unknown number, oblivious that it was a harbinger of her son's ruin. Bleary-eyed from days of sleeplessness, she checked the screen. Hello? Who is this? Calling someone's house this early in the morning. The voice on the other end was cold and official. This is the Financial Crimes Unit of the local police department. Are you related to a Mr. Kevin? Last name? He's been brought in for questioning under suspicion of investment fraud. You need to come down to the station immediately. Margaret dropped the glass of water she was holding. It shattered, sending shards flying. But she didn't even notice the cut on her hand as she screamed. Investment fraud? My Kevin? That can't be right. There must be some mistake. My son is such a hard-working boy. No mistake, ma'am. We have a pile of complaints filed by his victims. Just get down here. The line went dead. Like a madwoman, Margaret threw on a coat and rushed to the police station. At the entrance to the interrogation room, she saw her son Kevin, who had always been so arrogant, sitting with his head bowed, in handcuffs. As Margaret staggered toward him, the detective tossed a file on the table. Mr. Last name lost over $30,000 on illegal offshore betting sites. To cover that, he concocted a fake investment scheme, promising high returns to his friends and acquaintances. We've identified 15 victims so far, and the total damages exceeds $60,000. The world spun, and Margaret grabbed a nearby chair for support. Fraud? Kevin, is this true? Did you really trick people and take their money? Answer me. Kevin's lips trembled as he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Mom. I was going to win it back and repay them quickly. I didn't think it would get this big. Margaret pounded on Kevin's chest with her fists, sobbing. You fool. Your father is on his deathbed, and you're out gambling and committing fraud? Are you even human? Are you my son? The detective pulled her away with a cold look. This isn't the time or place for that. The victims are furious and demanding he be prosecuted to the fullest extent. If you don't reach a settlement, he's going to prison, no question. If you want to keep him out, you need to come up with the settlement money. Now, how much? How much do we need? The principal is $60,000, plus damages. You'll need at least $70,000 or $80,000. If it's not wired by the end of today, he's going straight to a holding cell. Margaret left the station in a daze. But when she arrived home, an even more horrifying scene awaited her. A group of 5 or 6 people, angry-looking men and weeping women were blocking her front door. You're Kevin's mother? Your son took my husband's entire retirement savings, $20,000. That was our daughter's wedding fund. Give me back my $3,000. Our son's college tuition. Kevin gambled it all away. This family has no regard for human life. The moment they saw Margaret, they grabbed her by the collar and pushed her into the living room. The already trashed house was now filled with the shouts of creditors. Please, everyone, calm down. I didn't know anything about this, I swear. I'm a victim too. Margaret collapsed to the floor, begging. One of the victims sneered. Didn't know? As his family, you bear joint responsibility. If you don't have the money, call your daughter-in-law. Get that woman, Clara, to pay up. At that, Margaret's eyes lit up. Clara? She's not here. She went to her parents' house. Then call her and get her here. Her husband is about to go to jail, and she's just resting? Tell her if we don't have the settlement money in 2 days, we're pressing charges. You got that? After the storm of victims had passed, Margaret sat in the living room and picked up her phone with a trembling hand. Clara was her only hope, but her phone was still off. That venomous girl. She turned off her phone. Preparing for this? How could she do this when her husband's life is on the line? Swallowing her last shred of pride, Margaret posted in the family group chat. Please, I'm begging you for help. Kevin has been arrested. Is there anyone who could lend me $50,000? Please. But the relatives, fed up with Margaret's arrogance, remained silent as if by pact. After a long while, one aunt sent a frosty reply. We just spent a lot on the holidays. We don't have that kind of money. Who would lend out that much? Asked Kevin's wife. It's her problem to solve. What does it have to do with us? Margaret threw her phone against the wall. It felt as if the whole world was laughing at her. At that same moment, in her parents' living room, Clara was enjoying a piece of perfectly broiled fish her mother had placed on her rice. The house was filled with the fragrant smell of a home-cooked meal and a gentle warmth. Sweetheart, eat slowly. You're all skin and bones. How much have you suffered? Mom, I'm so happy. I think this is the first time in 10 years I've eaten a meal with such peace of mind. Clara smiled serenely, but her eyes shone with a cool, determined light. After finishing her meal, she pulled a neatly organized file of documents from her bag. Mom, I've scheduled an appointment with a lawyer for tomorrow. I'm filing for divorce. Good. That's a very good decision. If you stayed in that house any longer, you would have withered away. Make sure you get a fair settlement. Of course, I'm going to claim every cent I poured into that family for 10 years, the value of my labor, and the loans in my name that Kevin blew through. The ones who will be thrown out with nothing won't be me. It will be them. There was no waver in Clara's voice. Every scenario was already perfectly mapped out in her head. Late that night, dozens of texts from Margaret arrived. Clara, please pick up the phone. Kevin is going to be locked up, but Clara didn't read a single one. Sitting alone on the floor of her dark living room, Margaret finally realized that the daughter-in-law she had treated so cruelly was, in fact, the last pillar holding up her entire world. With a trembling hand, Margaret picked up the phone and dialed. Her pride was screaming, but to solve the immediate crisis of hospital bills and her son's impending jail time, she had to drag Clara back. After a few rings, Clara's mother answered. Hello? Is this Clara's mother? This is Kevin's mother, her mother-in-law, Margaret. Margaret tried to compose her voice to sound authoritative, but the reply was as cold as ice. What can I do for you? Calling at such a late hour. Well, Clara isn't answering her phone, and I heard she's there. Could you please put her on? I have a lot to say to her. My daughter is resting. She came home with her body and spirit in tatters. She doesn't have the strength to take a single phone call. If you have something to say, you can say it to me. Startled by the firm tone, Margaret reflexively raised her voice. Resting? The family is in shambles. Her father-in-law is on his deathbed in the ICU, and a daughter-in-law has the luxury of sleeping. Wake her up and send her home immediately. Clara's mother's voice cut through Margaret's tirade like a knife. Watch your words. If your family is in shambles, it's your responsibility as the head of the house to fix it. Why are you trying to push it onto my precious daughter? My daughter is not your servant. Push it onto her. Isn't it a daughter-in-law's duty to be the first to step up when there's a family crisis? I've been teaching her for 10 years, and she's still like this. It makes me question her upbringing. Upbringing? Is making my daughter cry tears of blood for 10 years what you call your family's upbringing? If you want my daughter back, you can come get her yourself. And you'll have to get on your knees and apologize sincerely first. What? Apologize? What did I do wrong that I need to apologize for? Is scolding a daughter-in-law for not fulfilling her duties something to apologize for? Publicly humiliating her in front of all those relatives, working her like a slave for 10 years, forcing her to bear the full burden of her father-in-law's medical bills. Apologize for all of it. Otherwise, my daughter is not setting foot near that house again. Margaret was so flabbergasted she could only sputter in rage. Screaming that she would never apologize, she heard the line go dead. Staring at the silent receiver, Margaret gritted her teeth. Apologize? I'd die first before I bow my head to her. Never. But reality was far harsher than Margaret's pride. The hospital informed her that if a proper caregiver wasn't hired immediately, they would forcibly discharge the patient due to the abysmal hygiene conditions. And Kevin's victims were showing up at the house daily, causing a scene and demanding their money. Cornered, Margaret called her old home again. This time, by a stroke of luck, Clara answered. "It's me, Margaret." "What is it?" Clara's voice wasn't the tearful, broken one Margaret had expected. It was so calm and cool. It was chilling. "Well, Clara, how long are you going to stay holed up over there? Get your things and get your ass over here right now. Who's going to take care of your father-in-law? Who's going to do all this mountain of housework? You can do it. You're healthy, aren't you?" "What? Me? Your mother-in-law? Am I supposed to be scrubbing floors and changing diapers at my age? You're doing this just to spite me, aren't you?" "Those are the things I did, alone, every single day for 10 years. You'll get used to it after a week. Oh, and don't forget to prepare the 15 dishes for the memorial service." The back of Margaret's neck tightened, and her voice trembled. "Are you, a daughter-in-law, talking back to your mother-in-law? If you don't come back right now, I'll have you removed from the family register." "I'd appreciate that. I'm planning on quitting my role as a daughter-in-law anyway. Are you prepared to apologize?" "Apologize? Why should I apologize to you? A daughter-in-law gets scolded for her mistakes. Is that something to receive an apology for? Then we have nothing more to say. Go ahead and uphold your precious family traditions with your own two hands." "Wait, Clara. Kevin. Our Kevin is rotting in a holding cell. He needs $60,000 for the settlement. Your parents can afford that, can't they? You have to save your husband." "Huh?" Clara was silent for a moment, then replied with a bitter laugh. "That's Kevin's problem to solve, not mine. Why should I have to pay for the money he lost gambling? Before I was Kevin's wife, I was a person, and I've been used by you people more than enough. I've erased your names from my life." The call ended. Margaret slammed her fist on the floor and wept. She finally understood that the daughter-in-law was the pillar that held up the house, but only after that pillar had been removed. Still, she refused to admit her own faults, blaming everyone but herself. Meanwhile, in her childhood bedroom, Clara lay with her head in her mother's lap. Her mother gently caressed Clara's calloused hands and whispered, "You did well, my daughter. You finally have some life back in your face." "Mom, I was so scared. I kept thinking, if I'm not there, what will happen to my father-in-law? What will happen to Kevin? But now that I've let go, I realized something. They weren't worried about me. They were worried that their tool had disappeared." Clara's eyes were now as clear and hard as glass. She picked up the briefcase she had prepared for the next day. The following morning, Clara sat in the cold, sterile air of the jail's visitation room. When Kevin appeared on the other side of the glass, he looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days, a disheveled mess. "Clara, you came. You brought the money, right? You have the settlement money?" Kevin clung to the bars, his hands outstretched pathetically. Clara looked at him with emotionless eyes and slid a single sheet of paper through the slot. "What's this? The settlement agreement?" "No. It's the divorce agreement. Sign it." Kevin's eyes looked like they were about to pop out of his head. "What? Divorce? You're talking about divorce in a situation like this? Are you crazy? You should be helping me get out of here first. The reason to help you has disappeared. As of today, I'm not your wife. If you don't sign, we'll go to court. I'll submit all the evidence, your gambling history, the money you took from our accounts, the fraud charges. You won't get a single penny in the division of assets." "Clara, please? I was wrong. Just help me one more time." Kevin began to beg shamelessly, but Clara was already standing up. "The people you should be begging are the victims you defrauded. And go tell your mother this, the decay of your house because the daughter-in-law is gone. That's just the beginning." Clara walked out of the visitation room without a backward glance. The bright sunlight that greeted her in the hallway felt like a blessing for her new life. For the first time in 10 years, Clara took a deep breath that filled her lungs with clean air and burst out laughing. It was the beginning of true freedom. 3 months later, I stood on the steps of the county courthouse with the final divorce decree in my hands. 10 years of a hellish life had finally come to an end, marked by a few sheets of paper. I slowly descended the steps and looked up at the sky. It was so clear, almost painfully blue, without a single cloud, as if it were blessing my future. The court had recognized my 10 years of contributions, and ordered a settlement of $30,000. It wasn't a large sum, but it was the bare minimum of just compensation for the tears of blood I had shed. My lawyer, packing his briefcase beside me, shook my hand. Congratulations, Clara. You went through so much. You're officially and completely a free woman now. Thank you, counselor. Thanks to you, I've gotten my life back. I've received what I was owed, so I have no regrets. I tucked the papers deep into my bag and walked away with a light step. I didn't look back, not even once. At that same time, the scene at my former in-laws' house was the polar opposite of my peace. Margaret was sprawled on the living room sofa, arguing heatedly with a caregiver agency representative on the phone. What? $3,000 a month? Why is it so expensive? Ma'am, that's the going rate these days. For patients like your husband, who've moved from the ICU to a nursing facility, it's more hands-on work, so it costs more. If you don't like it, you can do it yourself. The agent hung up abruptly. Margaret hissed and tapped at her calculator. $3,000 for the caregiver, $2,000 for the facility. That's $5,000 a month. My pension and Kevin's wages combined aren't enough. How am I supposed to manage this? On the coffee table, flyers for catering services for memorial events were scattered about. Her father's memorial was next week, but Margaret couldn't even fathom going grocery shopping. With a trembling hand, she dialed a number from a flyer. Hello, I'd like to order about 10 dishes for a memorial service. What are the prices? It depends on the type and quantity, but it usually starts at $1,500. For a large family gathering, it requires more work, so there's an additional fee. $1,500? Is the food gold-plated? Can't you give me a discount? Ma'am, try going to the market yourself, buying the ingredients, and spending 2 days and nights cooking and prepping. Then see if you think that price is expensive. If you don't want to pay, you'll have to make it yourself. After that call ended, Margaret clutched her head and sank into the sofa. If that witch Clara were here, all of this would have been free. The table would have been overflowing with food without costing a dime. Just then, a message popped up in the family group chat. The relatives who used to tiptoe around Margaret were now openly mocking her. Margaret, what are your plans for the memorial next week? Don't tell me you're ordering takeout again. Margaret hesitated, then swallowed her pride and replied, I'm not feeling well, so I've decided to use a caterer this time. It's the thought that counts, right? The criticism came immediately, as if they had been waiting. Catering. You're holding a family memorial with catered food. The ancestors will be turning in their graves. Then you should do it yourself. When Clara was here, you didn't lift a finger. Now, you're saying it's too hard and hiring it out? Honestly, without Clara, this family isn't even a proper family anymore. She did everything, from the caregiving to the memorials. What exactly have you been doing all this time, Margaret? Margaret slammed her phone on the table. Her hands were shaking and her face was burning with humiliation. But no one came to her defense. Instead, relatives started leaving the group chat one by one. I won't be attending any family memorials for the foreseeable future. I have no interest in eating food made without any heart. We're busy too, so we can't make it. You have fun on your own, Margaret. A week later, on the day of the memorial, the living room was set with lukewarm food in plastic containers from the caterer. Where once over 50 people would have bustled, only a handful of relatives sat reluctantly. Margaret, it's so empty in here. And what is this food? Your daughter-in-law's cooking used to melt in your mouth. This just tastes like salt. That's right. Clara had a real gift. Why did you have to abuse such a precious daughter-in-law and chase her away? Margaret's face turned red, but she couldn't say a word. The memorial was over in a miserable 30 minutes. After the relatives left, Margaret was left alone in the empty house. Looking at the leftover catered food, she let out a deep sigh. Is this the family I wanted? The seasons changed, and another Thanksgiving approached. Margaret boasted and called her relatives, but their replies were cold. We'll be celebrating at our own house this year. When we go to your place, there's nothing good to eat, and the atmosphere is just awful. In the end, Margaret faced the holiday alone. Her father-in-law had been moved to a substandard nursing home she could barely afford. Kevin, released on probation, had disappeared somewhere to avoid his gambling debts. Margaret sat alone in the empty living room, watching a Thanksgiving special on TV and wiping away tears. If only Clara would come back, we could go back to the old days with the house full of people, and I would be respected again. But Clara never came back. At the same time, Clara was at her parents' home, sharing a simple but warm Thanksgiving meal with her mother. Honey, have some more turkey. I put lots of the dark meat you like in your gravy. Thanks, Mom. It's delicious. There were no 15 extravagant side dishes or a massive ham on the table, but 2 bowls of steaming mashed potatoes and a few simple, lovingly prepared vegetables filled Clara's heart more than any feast in the world. Mom, why did I live so foolishly for 10 years? Why did I try to handle all that food by myself? The pressure of being the perfect daughter-in-law must have been heavy. What a waste, letting that meaningless title eat away at you. Taking a big bite of turkey, Clara said, I finally realized that what's more important than appearances is myself. This simple meal, where no one is judging and I don't have to impress anyone, is the most perfect Thanksgiving meal of my life. Her mother squeezed her still rough hand and said, You did the right thing. From now on, just live your own life. Not a life of serving others, but one where you are the main character. Mom, I start my new job next month. It's at a small cafe near here. The owner said she loves my baking. It's not a lot of money, but with the money I earn myself, I'm going to take you on a trip. Outside the window, soft snow was falling, covering the world's grime in a blanket of white. That night, Clara wrote a short entry in her journal. Today, for the first time, I celebrated my real Thanksgiving. A day where I existed not as someone's servant, but only as myself. So, this is what it feels like to be free. Clara closed her journal and settled into the most peaceful sleep she'd had in a decade. Meanwhile, in the silent living room of her former home, Margaret watched a holiday special and threw the remote control on the floor. Family, what a joke. It's all meaningless. Where did everyone go? In the empty house, only Margaret's hollow cries echoed. The glory of the once great family had vanished forever, along with the smell of rotting food. The one who left that hellish house survived, while those who remained were slowly crumbling in the graves they had dug for themselves. What do you think of this situation? Please leave a comment. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and leave a like. I will continue to share similar stories.